Hey everybody, I'm Marilyn Chakota. You can find everything with me at mcc.coach. Happy to give some advice today on strength training. I got sent some wonderful questions, so hopefully you find these helpful. Please feel free to reach out if you want to follow up or you have any follow-up or any more questions after this. So strength training, how should you reduce strength training before races? And with all of these questions and all of these answers, always know that there is it depends around it, because it really depends on the athlete. To me, I'm big on training should be individualized, and there's a lot of circumstances that go into each person's training program and what is exactly right for them. So depends on what kind of strength training cycle you're on, how you respond to strength training, what your actual rest of your training looks like. Some people will keep strength training going right up until, let's say you have a Saturday or a Sunday race, and the last time that they do some kind of strength training might be on a Monday or on a Tuesday, it being on that day quite light, mostly mobility focused. It could be body weight exercises or activation type exercises. And that can be done anywhere from 72 hours to 5 days prior to a main event. And you can still see some benefits, and it's not going to take away from your race at all. I would not recommend lifting heavy weights once you're within race week, unless that's something that you've tried and true and you're really adapted to, and you know that the specific purpose behind that and why you're doing that. I haven't seen a whole lot of athletes that respond well to heavy lifting within 10 days of a major event. So typically any kind of heavy lifting, if that's something that's part of your program and you do it consistently, and it's something that has been part of your race buildup and that works for you, then I would recommend your last heavy lift being somewhere between 2 weeks and 10 days out from your major event, probably closer to 2 weeks. We want to give your central nervous system some time to repair and freshen up, and we want to make sure that you're not having any residual fatigue left over from the lifting. So if it's body weight type exercises, activation exercises, mobility exercises, that can be anywhere up to 48 hours, 72 hours, and even 5 days out from a main event. If it's any kind of lifting with weights and any kind of heavy lifting, you want to have that, at least 2 weeks out, I would say, would be the last time you do that. That was the second question. How far away do you reduce it? So that timeline. Now, ideally, you're periodizing your strength training based on what you need, and there's going to be a block of time in the year where your strength training is your priority, and it has a progressive build to it. Maybe there is a foundation laying period, and then there is a testing period, and then there's going to be a period where you're working up to heavier weights for you, and that cycle might be somewhere between 12 weeks and 16 weeks, where it's changing in terms of exercises, sets, and reps, and load as far as how much weight you're using, and it increases as the blocks go on. The weight is increasing, the sets and reps are coming down, that kind of thing. So that's a whole bit of periodization. And then once you're within your, let's say 12, depending on the athlete, 12 to 16 weeks, and you're starting to get into a real race block where you're really focused on maximizing your swim, bike, and run. And maybe your strength training starts to evolve into more sport-specific type strength. And what you're doing in actually the gym, again, is much more body weight, injury prevention, activation, maybe a little bit of plyometrics. And only maybe if you're needing to keep a little bit of lifting in there or a little bit of heavy lifting in there, it might be something like a leg press or a trap bar deadlift. Certainly keeping calf raises going all the time, RDLs, things like that. But once you're in that race block, typically if you're periodizing the year, and I'm talking in generals for a lot of people, that's going to look different. Like I say, training should be individualized, and so you might be different than that. If you're the type of athlete that needs strength training that has some load to it in terms of weight year round, and you taper that off 2 weeks before an event and then recover from your event and then right back to it, that might be for athletes who strength is a limiter for them. They're a little bit maybe smaller athlete, and they're really trying to build that strength. They lose strength quite quickly. They recover quickly from the strength work. The load that they're lifting is not really very heavy in terms of central nervous system fatigue and the amount of load that they're actually moving. And so sometimes those athletes actually do need some resistance and some heavier lifting year round. So again, all of these depends on the athlete and what they're doing. But for the general, if you're periodizing your year in the off season, when you're doing more aerobic training, you're quite far away from your event, and that is your primary focus. That's when you would do, like I say, base training phase, and then a structured phase where the weight is increasing, the reps and sets are going down, and you're really trying to build that pure strength up. So that can look different. So the other question was on gender. Does it change with gender? It can. Sometimes, sometimes females struggle to build a little bit more muscle mass, or they lose muscle mass quicker, depending on the age. That's not always true. I certainly myself as a female, I gain muscle mass really quickly. I don't need a lot of strength work. I hold strength quite well for an endurance athlete. So, and I have other female friends that are the same. So it's not necessarily gender specific. I do have male friends that struggle to put on muscle mass. They lose strength really quickly. So there can be a little bit of, yes, a lot of females over a certain age, this can be a rule of thumb. However, again, it's not a one shoe fits all. So not all females should be lifting heavy things. Some should and some should not. And then maybe only some should at certain times of the year, like I talked about in the off season. Pardon me. And same with men. There are men who have, naturally a lot of strength. Maybe they're a little bit bigger in size. They put on muscle mass really quickly. They gain strength really, really easily. It's not a limiter in terms of their swim, bike, and run. The amount of weight that they can move in the gym surpasses what is going to actually translate and be useful in their swim, bike, and run. And maybe that bulk is holding them back mobility-wise or even weight-wise for their swim, bike, and run. And so they're not going to need to lift heavy weights and continue to build strength and put on mass. And that can be true if it's a male or a female. So, you have to look at those types of things. So what type of athlete are you? How do you respond to the strength training? And when you do strength training, the idea, if your primary focus is swim, bike, and run, the idea is that it is adding to your swim, bike, and run, making you a better athlete. Is it helping you be more injury prevention, more power on the bike, more durability on the run? Do you need just more strength overall? Do you need more sport-specific strength? So if it's not adding to your swim, bike, and run and making you a better triathlete or a better athlete overall, and physically it's not adding to anything and it's starting to take away, that's when you need to look at, is this the right program for me? So it's not necessarily, do I just lift heavy things all the time? That's a little bit of a phrase that is said a lot these days. Some athletes, yes, and at some points of the year, maybe yes, but not for everybody. And certainly in terms of actual heavyweight leading into any kind of event, you really want to be monitoring, like I say, muscle soreness, overall fatigue, being able to hit your key sessions, and central nervous system fatigue. So that's a confusing part too. How often do I strength train? One of the things that you get with endurance athletes is they think they need to go about their strength training the same way they do their swim, bike, and run, which is often and a lot. And that's not the case. Strength training isn't like that. If you're doing core exercises, body weight exercises, and activation and rehab stuff, that can be done frequently. That can be done, it can even be done daily, or it can be done as a little activation routine if you're doing like a band routine, calf raises, glute bridges, those kinds of things where they're purely for activation, injury prevention, and you can do that maybe before you run, that kind of thing. That is fine to do frequently and often, maybe even, in the morning for 10 minutes, at night for 10 minutes, single leg RDL, calf raises, glute bridges, monster walks with a band, a little 10-minute routine, maybe 10 push-ups, something like that, and then 30-second plank, and you're on your way. And so that is fine. If you're actually doing a strength training program where you're lifting weights, we don't need to do that the same as your endurance training. Most of the time, most athletes will only need it twice a week, and they want to be placed 48 hours to 72 hours apart. And it's really important, the relationship to your swim, bike, and run, where that is placed. And you're watching for, again, if you're doing any big gear work on the bike, if you're doing any paddle work in the pool, you're doing hill reps on the run, those are also strength sessions. So you can overdo stacking strength load. For example, if someone does, strength work on Tuesday, and then they do a big gear bike on Wednesday, and then a hill rep on Thursday, that's likely too much load in the same energy system too many days in a row. So you'd be better off to do Tuesdays where maybe you do your big gear on the bike, followed by your strength session later in the day, and then the next day is maybe an aerobic session or a high turnover neuromuscular type session, but the opposing energy system of some kind, and not overdoing for too many days in a row the same energy system. And so understanding that there is sport specific strength and then there is gym strength. What kind of gym strength are you doing? What kind of load is that putting on not only your joints, your muscles, your central nervous system, that kind of stuff. So when you're moving weight, usually that's twice a week, minimum of 48 hours apart from one another. Ideally, let's say it's on a Tuesday and possibly again on like a Thursday or a Friday or even Saturday after your long sessions. So it's far away from that Tuesday. If you're only lifting load and weight one day a week, you could put your more activation type stuff on the Monday and body weight stuff on the Monday. It's tricky on a Monday because you've probably just had a big weekend. You did a big bike or a really hard bike, and then maybe some kind of really high quality run, or you've done your bricks, your quality sessions on the weekend when you have more time. So doing strength on a Monday can work in certain circumstances, certain types of strength. But if you're moving heavy weight, if you're doing low rep, high weight, Monday is likely not the best day for that after the load of the weekend, and then be expecting yourself to be able to also, again, then on Tuesday, produce a good workout in terms of intensity on the bike or the run. So total load across your whole training program and how the strength training is married into that, what type of strength training you're doing and how it's married into that is very, very important. And the very last question is, are there times a year I should do more or less strength training? I think I've covered that as I'm talking here to you. Again, all of it depends. If you're someone who needs strength training all year round and just a little taper into your races, if you're someone who loses strength quickly and that it's adding to what you're able to do in the swim, bike, and run. And then again, if you're not, maybe, some of the naturally strong athletes who build muscle really fast, they might only do a very small block of strength training in the wintertime, a 4-week cycle or even an 8-week cycle, and then that's it. Or maybe they only do sport-specific type strength training, activation drills, and injury prevention, because the amount of mass that they gain and stiffness in their body and the recovery that it might take for them to get over moving weight is greater than the benefits that they're going to get. They're already quite strong for an endurance athlete, and so they're better off spending their time swimming, biking, and running. So really depends on the type of athlete you are, what you need, what your training looks like, how you respond to strength training, how does it affect your primary sessions, all these things, they really matter. So hopefully I've answered some questions today. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out. You can find everything with me at mcc.coach. Cheers.